I had a bit of an incident. Well, not an incident, but I discovered something. When I set the top down on the body, as I was thinking about getting it properly lined up to glue, I noticed that there was a bow, or what appeared to be a bow at first, a bow that way, so that the middle was up off the body while the edges were touching the body. A small bow, but a bow nonetheless. And so to get that bow out, I took the risk of breaking the body by clamping it flat. And as soon as I did so, it snapped along the glue joint. And it became clear that the surfaces that were glued weren't perfectly at right angles to the body, so that when it was glued up, it wasn't flat. The top was sitting up, the middle was sitting up from the body. So I planed those surfaces. It was a very, very slight angle, but you don't really want any angle other than 90 degrees. So I planed them flat and re-glued it. So now it is sitting much better. This is still a bit messy, but that's okay. There's plenty of time to tidy that up. Anyway, so that's sorted now. Crisis averted. Well, not really a crisis, but problem fixed. What I'm doing just now, and I'm just about done with this edge, is rounding over the edge of the pocket. I'll sand it by hand once I've done this. I'm doing it now because there's obviously no way I would be able to do this when the top is glued on, and that's what I'll be doing after I've done this and then tidied it up. I will be gluing the top on. As with all glue jobs, one of the difficulties initially is stopping the surfaces from moving around on each other. Now, to some extent, that will be mitigated by the fact that the body has the pocket fairly snugly around the neck, which will stop it from moving to a degree, but not completely. So what I'm going to do is I will drill a couple of holes through the top into the body, and they won't be there in the final build because I will be routing that area out for pickups. So these are just temporary holes, and once I've drilled them, I will put a piece of dowel in, just to help hold the body in place so that it doesn't move around on the glue and things don't get all out of whack, because you don't want things getting out of whack. So I'll just do that now. Doesn't have to be very deep. I just drilled until I could feel that the bit had gone through the top and a little way into the body. Car's driving away as I do this. But that's it. So come back in a moment and you'll see the dowel in there and we'll glue this thing on. Doesn't need to be terribly pretty, just needs to be in the right place. Well, this is kind of a big moment for me. Gluing my first top on. I hope this doesn't go terribly, but I have a feeling it won't go perfectly. Let's find out. You definitely want the glue all the way to the edges. The last thing you would ever want is to have an unsightly gap right at the edge where everyone can see it. Gorilla Glue is fairly forgiving with gaps because it does expand a fair bit, which is a plus and a minus. It does create extra work, but if you have little gaps like along the seam there, that is something Gorilla Glue can be quite helpful for filling them up. Now, I don't really want glue in those channels that I have routed out, so I'll be careful not to get too much around there, otherwise it'll be difficult to poke my cables through. But don't worry about messing up the edges, that's kind of inevitable. I must say actually the guitar, the body now with the redwood and the stripe with the glue over it, which now in its present state looks like a kind of lacquer, is rather impressive. So I'm quite teased about how I think the back of the guitar will look. Let's get this on, and then I'll poke in those dowels just to discourage this baby from moving around too much. Alright, now the holes for the dowels are actually a little wider than the dowels themselves. Maybe I should have done that a bit tighter, but never mind. That's pretty good. It's going to stop it from sliding a lot anyway. So let's get this clamped down. I don't have a good jig for clamping tops on while they're gluing. I've seen some nice ones. Maybe I'll make one day. But in the meantime, I'm going to be quite old school about this. And just clamp down bits of wood onto it and use clamps directly on the body. I'm optimistic about that. I think it should give enough pressure across the body in every direction to do a decent glue job. So I guess we just leave this until it's glued. Now, some of you might have noticed this when you saw me gluing the top on. Why didn't you warn me? And it became apparent to me shortly after I had glued the top on, and I needed to clean up a lot of the glue that was coming out all over the place. But I used too much glue when I glued this top on, and it's touching both the body and the piece of redwood upon which this guitar is sitting, and I neglected foolishly to put down some plastic wrap, as I would normally have done when gluing something. Well, I have been doing it lately, but not this time, of course. So this is glued to the wood, just around the edges though, and I'm not going to be too precious about the edges, because I'm going to be rounding over the back edges anyway, so the corner of the edge will be cut off. Nonetheless, this is going to get a little bit messy, because what I'm going to have to do is take something like my faithful paint scraper and just kind of separate this all the way around, which will work. It's just I shouldn't have used so much glue, then I wouldn't have to do this. So I'm going to spend the next little while prizing my guitar off the redwood. Fortunately, the redwood was sitting here. It would have been more annoying if I glued it to the bench itself. This way it doesn't really matter if I pull off little chips of redwood, because it just doesn't matter. It is separating slowly, one piece at a time. But don't do this. Use less glue. So I'll come back to you when I've got this prized off. So here is the aftermath, which is survivable. So as I said, there will be some parts where there were bits of the redwood plank that this thing was sitting on that have been stuck to the redwood body of the guitar. I can clean that up, sand it, what have you. It looks messy now, but it can still look quite lovely. Unfortunately, there was a part where a piece of redwood from the guitar came off being stuck to the bench. But I can redeem that as well, because I've been tossing up the idea. I accidentally had the camera pointing at my yellow shoes. I've been tossing up the idea of doing some pretty heavy beveling and contouring on the back, and that is quite shallow. So say hello to where I'm going to be doing some contouring. That'll come out. Trust me, it'll all be good.